clinical psychology degree at University of Colombo, and which is the first training program in professional clinical psychology in the country. She's also the founder president of the Sri Lanka Psychologists Association. So, and her research interests include humanities, culturally appropriate psychological interventions, child maltreatment, and violence. So, Priyanjali, I think I'll hand over the session to you. And thank you very much for agreeing and coming and talking to us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Patran and Sajid, for inviting me. I think we have 1 hour, isn't it, Sajid? Is it 1 hour and half an hour I speak?
Yes, madam. We have 1 hour.
I speak in half an hour.
Yeah, for the question and discussion, madam. So the participants can direct their questions through the chat option, or after madam's lecture or the presentation, they can use the raise hand option and ask the questions. Right, madam, you can proceed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sajid. Thank you. So shall I just share my slides now? Okay.
Yes, madam.
Okay. So I was very happy that Sajid invited me to talk about this topic because it's something that's really close to my heart. Not that the H index is close to my heart, but what the term X index really means. Because though we would have put H index here, we are referring to all that we do in life, which we just do without thinking whether we really need to do it, whether it gives us happiness, whether it gives us fulfillment, whether it leads to life satisfaction, etc., etc. So H index is not only the H index, but everything else that we do in life without actively thinking about it, because everybody else is doing that. And then we just continue doing that over the years, and then that's the end of our life. So the question really is that the kind of life that we want to live? Or are we looking at a broader index of how successful our life has been at the end of the day? So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. So, Sajid, am I still connected to you? Because I don't get any feedback. So.
Yes, madam, we can hear you clearly.
Okay. We can hear you. Thank you. So yesterday I was listening to a talk by Ajahn Amaro. He is the current abbot of the Amaravati Monastery in the United Kingdom. He took over from Ajahn Sumedho. Most of you would have heard about the Amaravati Monastery. It comes from the Thai forest tradition. So I was listening to his talk, and this is the introduction to his talk, which I thought was really interesting, and I thought I'd share it with you. So Ajahn Amaro says that he was the abbot of a monastery called Abhayagiri in California. And it was a huge multi-acre monastery. And next to that was a Zen monastery. And the Theravada Buddhist monks and the Zen Buddhist monks got on very well with each other. And the California Buddhist community had organized this huge gathering for this very well-known Zen master who had come to California. So everything was done really well. I was held in this huge open-air mansion of a very, very wealthy American. And, little eats were given out to people before the Zen Buddhist master came to give his talk. And there's this great air of expectation. And, what is the Zen master going to tell us that will change our life kind of thing. Then at the time allocated, there had been this huge staircase that comes down, and this Zen Buddhist master, by the way, this is a real story, Zen Buddhist master wearing his Zen outfit, comes down really slowly and regally down the stairs, and everybody's in absolute awe of his calmness, his composure, etc. And they're just waiting for these words of wisdom to come out of his mouth. And then he stops a few steps down, and he looks at everybody and says, "You do realize all of you are going to die." So then Ajahn Amaro goes on to say, that's not exactly what the Californian Americans wanted to hear, because many of us don't want to hear that, do we? But that term, that concept, really puts us into perspective to decide what we want to do with these few years that we have in our life. Because we don't even want to accept that there is an end to this time that, and for so much so that when you refer to our own death, we say things like, if anything should ever happen to me, as if it will not happen. Everything happens to somebody else. You know, it could happen to Sajid or Professor Pathiran, but not to me. That's why we say, if anything should ever happen to me seems like the most realistic ones. So, but when we want to consider whether we want more in life than what the framework of what society wants us to do, including running behind a very fruitful H index, it's very helpful to think that we have only a limited number of years. And in that limited number of years, what is it that we need to do and we want to do that would make life fulfilling at the end of the day? So if we don't grasp this bigger picture of life, we tend to occupy ourselves in mundane matters, like how many papers do we have, and just publishing here and there, no major impact, you know, starting a private practice, another private practice, going on for hours, you know, getting your children to school, tuition, classes, university, just what everybody else does, and we just do it, the mundane things, without really grasping the bigger picture of what life is. Now, of course, all spiritual dimensions have considered this, and we know that all religions have considered this big life question, but so has psychology. So now psychology is quite a young field. It's about 120 years of age. Started with its founder, Sigmund Freud. But an area of psychology that is particularly relevant to our discussion today is called humanistic psychology, particularly a psychologist, American psychologist by the name of Abraham Maslow. And Maslow was really interested to see that in his clinical work, he met people at different levels of psychological functioning. I mean, that's not like something out of the box, because we all find people at different levels of psychological functioning. But what he found out was that there was a very small component of people who were hugely functional, highly contributing to society, and with great sense of self-satisfaction, which he called at the top of the pyramid as self-actualizers. And he did a lot of studies on these people, and he studied people like Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, etc., Martin Luther King, because he was around that time, to understand the psyche of these people. What is it that made them large-than-life figures? And these large-than-life figures are not only people that we know, such as Mahatma Gandhi or Nelson Mandela, or the superheroes, but also people who are heroes in a small neighborhood, in a community, who is not heard of, he's not written about, but people consider them as exceptionally valuable people with a great deal of self-respect and resilience. So what Maslow said was that humans go through a form of development, which can be indicated as a pyramid, and he said that most human beings are always stuck at the level of giving into their physiological needs. So they're only interested in their food, the water, the warmth, the rest, in the lowest of the pyramid that's in this slide. And that's understandable because there's a great deal of poverty in our world, Africa, India, etc. And most people are just stuck at getting these basic necessities filled. They can't think of anything else. So if we find beggars and homeless people, they don't even think about a loving relationships or wanting loving relationships or being a nurturing parent, but they can't because they can't. They just need to have those physiological needs fulfilled, and that's their life story. Then Maslow goes on to say that if a bunch of individuals have met their physiological needs, such as people like us, then the mind starts seeking for another dimension of satisfaction, which is safety nets. So, looking into insurance policy, buying a bit of land in a safer environment, a safer neighborhood, maybe having a safer vehicle as opposed to a moped. You might think of a three-wheeler, or then you might think of a smaller vehicle, safety and security needs. Then when an individual's safety needs are also met along with their physiological needs, then the human mind starts craving for something even more fulfilling, because the mind has that capacity and now the necessity, and that is to form intimate relationships. And we're not talking about sexual intimate relationship, but it's also thinking of deep bonds, having good nurturing relationship with your parents, your child, your community, having friends, having long-term friendships, working on long-term friendships, quality versus quantity kind of stuff like that. So the mind starts wanting that, and you yourself may have sensed that, that we want friends more as we go up in our career than when we were mid-career and trying to finish our MD or MS or PhDs, because that you're still trying to build your other stuff happening to you. Then once the belonging and love needs are satisfied or suitably satisfied, the human mind starts feeling a lapse, and they start looking for something else. And that's where the H index comes really, which is this esteem need. The need to now look for esteem, a sense of accomplishment and prestige, not only in the eyes of our society, of our community, of our friends and colleagues, but also within ourselves. So we want to feel, we have done things, we have accomplished things, I have like a alphabet behind my name in the form of, qualifications and, having double PhDs or so many degrees, just to feel a sense of accomplishment. And that's the natural progress of the human mind. Now, many of us who is in this forum stops at esteem needs. But in the general public, if you look at poverty levels in our world, many of us stop at the physiological needs. Ours is a niche market, so we stop at esteem needs. And that's where this whole dialogue about H index and everything associated with the H index comes into it, because H index for most of us is our level of prestige and feeling of accomplishment, and number of papers and citations, and how many committees are we in, even though those committees may be rudimentary and non-functional, but we think, oh, I'm in so many national level committees or presidential task forces or international bodies, or I'm a consultant here and there, though you may not be actually good for meetings, but it just kind of buffers up our CV. But what Maslow says, and of course what religions and spiritual dimension has spoken over the centuries, is that that actually doesn't give us a sense of well-being and satisfaction and mental health. In fact, if you want to get to that level of mental health and life satisfaction, you need to go to the final level of the pyramid, which we call as self-actualization, which is an internal sense of self-fulfillment, where even if you don't have a feeling of accomplishment, even if you are not held in prestige and esteem by your peers and colleagues and the neighborhood and the community, within yourself, you feel that you have done what you have wanted to do with this life. And very few people actually get there. Now, in Maslow's work, where he had studied well-known people in this world, like Mandela and Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Thich Nhat Hanh, where is those people which we all know? His analysis and psychoanalysis led to the belief that these people were self-actualized. But he also studied people in small villages, in communities, in tribes, in families, who were this stoic, the very steady human being who had a great deal of self-respect and which people came to because they were very great contributors. And those people were also self-actualized. So ultimately what we can come to the conclusion is that most humans, particularly in our professions, tend to plateau at this esteem level, esteem needs level, without really going on to the final fulfillment of our human potential. Now, why is that? Why do we kind of get stuck? One of the things is that our society places such emphasis on prestige and status and accomplishment, isn't it? Our childhood conditioning places it. Giving positions in school, we do know that that is highly detrimental to the mental health of a child. Giving, so you're number one, you're number two. I went to, when I was doing my O-levels, I went to an international school in Europe, and I did my O-levels in Sri Lanka National School. And when I went there, I was so suitably impressed that there was no positions given. I was just compared with myself from one term to another, and that really released this great stress on me. But here, this whole childhood conditioning that you have to bring prestige to yourself, to your family, to your siblings, to your parents, and that's a lot to do with achievements, academic-wise. It's so ingrained in us that we tend to emphasize accomplishments as something that is synonymous with our self-worth. Now, another reason that we might be stopping at the H-index or esteem needs is that we don't know what is beyond that. I remember I was going on a field trip with all my younger colleagues, who was one of my students at the medical faculty, and we were very great friends, and we always had this very deep conversations. And he was saying, madam, like, at that time I was the youngest professor at our faculty, and he was saying, why is it that you don't do lots and lots of work? Because that's what will improve this world. So I had this ongoing conversation with him because we were going on a long trip, and I realized that for him, at one point, I realized that he didn't know that there was anything more than publishing and any number of papers per year. He didn't realize that there's more to self-work to do than the number of papers you have to publish, you see. And I couldn't explain to him either because he wasn't at that point to understand what I'm saying. So what happens is that we become stuck doing what others do and what society tells us to do and what society tells us as what should be done. So it's basically quantity over quality. So now there's a few of us who sense that there is more to life than the X number of papers we have to publish or the number of citations you have and this index, that degrees, that committees, number of patients that we see, etc. Some of us, when we are in a still quiet mood, might sense that there is more to life than this. But we are afraid to venture out and not do things that society tells us to do, or do something different. Or just say, I'm going to do something. I'm not going to be stuck in this box of having to publish. I'm going to do something different, which really fulfills my potential. We are afraid to break our own boundaries. Or we just don't know how to do it. We just don't know how to, like, for example, if I'm really bored with, let me give you an example. I consult for the UN, and I was at this meeting in Thailand, and I met this psychiatrist from Senegal. A Senegalese psychiatrist, and he heads in the United Nations in New York. He heads what you call the CISMO. CISMO is the Critical Incident Stress Management Unit of the United Nations, and he's a psychiatrist by profession, really very well-read man. And what he was saying was, in his initial years in psychiatric practice, he realized he just doesn't want to do clinical work. He wants to do something more into protection of the world, and he got into doing what he referred to as negotiating with hijackers. That's quite different to psychiatry. So what he decided to do was he wanted to get into the field of how to talk to people who hijack in planes or ships or buildings, and to dialogue with them, and for them to release the victims that they have taken as ransom. So he decided, and people told him, and this is really crazy, you shouldn't do that, you should just stick to your psychiatric practice. And the more he thought about it, he felt he just doesn't want to be in this box. So he ventured out, and ultimately he became one of the best UN consultants on working with hijackers, and that's That's his career. So some of us may want to break our boundaries, but we just don't know how to do it. We don't have the contacts, we don't have the support system. Then, so then what is beyond? Then you might ask me, okay, fine. So what is this self-actualization, and what is beyond esteem needs? And what are you talking about, Pianjali? Because for some people, they don't even understand what we're talking about. So if you look at insights from geriatric psychology, but also as insights from your practice as physicians or medical students, when we our own personal life, we see people who are older, many of them who are really quite unhappy when they look back on their life. In fact, Erik Erikson, a very well-known developmental psychologist, he classified a life into 8 stages, where each individual goes through these 8 stages, and each 8 stages involves resolving a particular conflict pertinent to that stage in life. So the last stage in life, according to Erik Erikson, is something called ego integrity and despair, which occurs at 65 plus years, where a senior citizen looks back and recapitulates his or her life, wondering, was it a worthy life that I have lived? Have I fulfilled my life goals? And here when we talk about life goals, we're not talking about the H-index. We're not talking about the number of papers, but overall life goals of what kind of person have I been to my close family, to my organization, to my neighborhood, to my intimate ones, my children, my pets. Have I lived a life that I can say is guilt-free? And if an individual at this last stage in life can make a resolution where he looks back and is content and there is no bitterness, then that person's last stage of life is one of beauty. Now this bitterness that we talk about in old life may not be felt explicitly. I have seen people who still go on to do work and sit in their committees and still publish papers and seem to be, except outwardly, they seem to be very contributing. But how this bitterness shown is by their behavior, lack of laughter, lack of smiles, increase in cynicism, in criticism of others, or just the downward movement of the lips. You know, it's just when you look at them, you know that they haven't really grown into their old age. And the reason is they have been very focused on an H-index as opposed to a life index. Finally, how do we understand our life index and our life purpose? Because my life index and my life purpose won't be of yours, you know, because we're diverse people. But we do understand here that when we talk about life index, it talks about the overall you and where you are content being you, that you have a sense of fulfillment being you. And that would decide, and your purpose would make you get there. So what therefore is your life purpose? And if you don't know what that is, how would you know? Usually it's listening to that still voice inside of you when you're alone, when you're in silence, when you're in solitude. You know, when you're at home, like for example, today I'm doing this from home, I've been home the whole day, I'm in solitude. I've been doing some work on a paper, and then I've been having a meeting on Zoom, but I'm in solitude, but there's no other external things happening to my life. And in that moment of solitude, there's something inside us telling, Pianjali, do you really want to do this kind of stuff? I remember about 15 years ago, I was a consultant for a INGO, and every time I had to go twice a week to, you know, kind of work with their counselors and train them. And every time I just parked my car next to that building, I used to get on this major headache coming on, and very stressful. But I kept on going every month because, you know, I had a good consultancy fee coming on, and it looked really beautiful in my CV. That's the kind of stuff I did 15 to 20 years ago. But then one day when I was driving and I was really calm and quiet, I don't want to do this. It might look good on my CV, it might do wonders on my thing because it's an international NGO and whatnot, but this does not grow me. And that day I decided I'm going to resign from there. So listening to that still voice in you, when you do certain things, which might tell you, you are not happy doing this. Or when you're doing something that the society doesn't value, but your mind tells you, you're really happy, you're going to be good at this. Listen to that. Be courageous and go ahead and doing it, even as a side business. I have a colleague of mine in the medical practice, we're good friends, and she was saying, she's going to retire in about 10 years' time, and she's a physician by profession. And she said her still voice told her that what she really wants to do is talk to people and counsel people who are having medical health issues, not psychological issues, medical health issues. And then the thought of it really enlivened her, and then she started doing these courses in preparation for that, which is a huge departure from her medical career. So listening to that still voice might tell you where your life should lead you. Of course, you also have to be resistant to peer pressure and social structures, which might tell you this is not the way you should go towards. And your social structure might tell you this is not the way you should be doing this. You have to do this. Otherwise, people are going to be displeased by you. But if you really want to materialize your life purpose, you need to be strong to overcome that. And the practice of mindfulness, present moment awareness, which I won't be going into detail here, but some of you may be knowing, just being really in the present moment helps you kind of gauge what your unique life purpose could be as different from everybody else. So that is my talk today, Professor Patharan and Sajid. Maybe we can open for questions and take it from there.
Yes, thank you, madam. Now the time is for questions. So if you have any questions, you can directly unmute yourself and ask from Professor Priyanjali.
There's a question from Jaimal. Hi, Jaimal. When your still voice seems to be lovely to see you online. When your still voice seems to be a proud, Jaimal is one of my favorites, psychiatry and students of mine. Lovely to see you, Jaimal. When your still voice seems to be a programmed one, what is the way out? Yeah, so there's a programming from our childhood, isn't it? The conditioning that tells you, you have to be the best, you have to be this, you have to be in so many committees, otherwise why? Because our parents had told us that, and now we have forgotten the roots of that, and it has now become our own. There are people I know who, my own friends, colleagues, they're so unhappy being in this X number of committees, but they just do it anyway. And as Jaimal said, it's because of our childhood where parents have emphasized on the greatness of being achievement oriented. And now that little directions of theirs has become our still voice. So it is not easy, but I think the practice of living in the present, so living in the present, which Jaimal clearly knows very well about, and Professor Patharan has spoken about it as well in the past, is where we do our activities, daily activities, the regular activities such as cleaning ourselves, combing our hair, driving to work, staying in the bus halt, any of these activities with full awareness. And when we keep on doing our activities with full awareness, we start seeing that some of what is happening in our minds are actually conditionings, and not only in relation to life purpose, even in the way we react to others. For example, as a young person, I used to have, or young boy, even in my middle years, I used to have this very self-protective tendency when I was relating to people. And I didn't even know it was there. So I always used to keep people at a distance from me. I didn't know it was there to start with. So what you don't know, you can't work with. But as I kept on practicing living in the present moment, I really sensed that I have this deep conditioning which stems from my childhood family functioning, where I try to keep people at a distance in order to protect from getting harmed and hurt. And you suddenly see these conditionings in the deep roots of your mind. And when you see that, you can start working to overcome it. So in Jaima's question, it would be to really practice being mindful, being in the present moment, listening to the idiosyncrasies of your mind and what it says, and then putting effort to go against it so that the conditionings are broken. Then there's Shamali. Sometimes we are compelled to do things as it has to be done, even if you don't want to do it according to your insight. How should we respond? Certainly. So, for example, say being at the faculty, at whichever faculty, we might, for example, I might not like doing administrative work, which is a fact. But because I'm getting a salary, which is my duty and my job description, and I have committed to employment, then at least a minimum amount of such work has to be done. And that is ethical living and ethical conduct and right livelihood. So I would think, Shamali, it's a fine balance. When it is to do with responsibilities and duties, one does do it. But here the question about what Sajid has termed as H index is where, without even comprehension, we are running after goals which we have set for ourselves or the society has set for ourselves without questioning whether these goals are actually fulfilling, because we think it's fulfilling, but it may not be fulfilling. Is that clear, Shamali?
Yeah, Priyanjali, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Shamali.
If you have any other questions, please unmute your mics and you can directly ask from our prof.
It seems people might want to contemplate on these things, or they may have already contemplated, Sajid. To contemplate a little bit more on a different way of living, isn't it? It's a different way of living.
Yeah, it's very happy to see that a lot of non-medical people have joined this session.
Oh, is it? Good.
Yeah, because we have opened it up to the general public also, and for the rest of the other staff members of the university. So we have circulated this thing. So it's very happy to see a lot of other staff members also have joined for a session like this, the H index or the life index, because it's very valid for their lives, because the people are under stress when they are working. So
I think that itself, the fact that people are willing to join, it shows that maybe inside of their minds, they know that they're running what you call the rat race.
Yes,
they don't want to run the rat race.
Yeah.
But all the rats have made the race.
Yeah.
And now the rats themselves have to take a stand and say, well, you know, some of the rats don't want to be in the race.
Yeah.
So this rat is going to move on and do their own race. And that's okay, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. And the people are seeking for the ways to get out from this rat race. So since there are no questions in the chat, so shall we wind it up, madam? Or anyone else?
Yes, Sajid.
Anyone else who wants to ask questions? Because this recording will be available on social media also soon, and in the faculty web. So we will be circulating it. Yeah.
Another one.
Yeah.
Professor Gunatidaka point is profession moderates Profession moderates self-actualization. I'm not very clear, Professor Gunatilaka. Are you saying that a person's profession could lead to self-actualization? Is that what it is? Professor Gunatilaka, I was not really clear about your question.
It's better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Professor, can you hear me?
I can hear.
Well, what I said is, my thinking is whether our professional requirements, academic requirements, that is enforced by our profession, does it moderate our self-actualization? Is it professional related actualization as you see?
No, it's not. In the Maslow's hierarchy, it's nothing to do with the profession. It's a sense of self-satisfaction devoid of an individual's profession. So you could have a farmer in a particular problem. Okay, farming itself is a profession, say it's like a special, they are skill-based. But here it could be to do with, nothing to do with the profession. It is to do with your own knowing what one's life goals are, what one's life purpose is, which can happen even at a very young age, and where you work towards that with great joy, not because the society or your family have dictated those to you, because you have chosen it. And when you're working towards it, the process itself is fulfilling, and obviously getting to the goal is even more fulfilling. So it's that kind of self-actualization. It's nothing to do with the profession.
Professor, can I ask you a question?
Yes, Vishwara.
Professor, I come from a non-medical field.
Yeah.
And my question is, now as human beings, we play different roles. And as now, for example, I am a lecturer, so I love teaching and I really enjoy what I'm doing. But then I'm also a mother. So my question would be, would there be, I mean, for the moment, I believe that I do have a conflict between the roles that I am playing. So could there be a conflict between self-actualization as, I mean, could there be conflicts in different roles when it comes to self-actualization? For example, yeah.
So self-actualization is not a mind totally devoid of conflict.
Okay.
Now say, if you look at Nelson Mandela, who was deemed as a self-actualized person by Abraham Maslow, if you look at his biography, or even if you look at the movie Invictus, you will realize that he had certain distancing from his daughter in his first marriage. The unhappiness, and there are instances where he felt very alone because he had gone to the pinnacle of his political career. It was quite difficult for him to have. However, his sense of self-esteem overrides that.
Right.
So Vishwara, it isn't that it's a conflict. I mean, you'll have conflict until one is enlightened, but despite that, you feel, you had a good enough life and you look back. That's what it is.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Then there's another one. Do you think actualization is influenced by psychological bias? Well, I think it's not a bias, it's a state. So it's a state of feeling that a person has of him or herself. Usually it doesn't quite happen at a younger age unless you're very, very psychologically healthy from young ages that you grow into it. So I'm assuming, I don't know that I'm reading this question right, but when you say psychological bias, when you say the word bias itself has a kind of a negative connotation. It's not pure, while self-actualization, a mind that is self-actualized, is a pure state of mind of great sense of well-being, of having lived your life the way you think it should be lived, which is healthy for you, healthy for another person. And when you reflect on yourself, you feel good about yourself. So in that sense, bias, I don't think comes in.
Prof, it's quite interesting talking for me. Therefore, I would like to disturb you further on this. Like one more question, right?
Yes.
That is psychological biasness. I referred like something like, say, somebody is in a particular status where the person is exposed to mood continuously, mood effects. So the person's thinking, decision making is quite different than the other person who is psychologically balanced. Balanced. So would it influence the self-actualization? Because the biased person thinking process, rational process is different. Whether it's rational or irrational. So these thinking processes are different. So does it affect the final actualization? If it affects, is there a difference between this?
Well, if you look at a state of mind that is colored with self-actualization, now also remember that the self-actualized person, there can be even a person, some of us, and most of us may never have experienced self-actualization, but I certainly am not a self-actualized person. However, some of you, and myself included, may have had bouts of self-actualization. Sense of great sense of great well-being that may have been momentarily, hours, or like that. So that you would have got, unless so being totally always there is a very unlikely situation for most people according to Maslow. Now coming to Professor Chandana's question, if an individual's mood is low or is colored in certain ways, in a very unwholesome or unhealthy way, that is mutually exclusive to a self-actualized mind. That doesn't mean so. But what I said earlier is that we can have bouts of a self-actualized mind. Like for example, some of us when we are working. Now, one of my colleagues who's a surgeon at our faculty, he was telling me, when he has many hours of surgery, he's in such contentment. He doesn't even feel the hours passing, and then he just realizes hours have passed. Now that is called flow state, F-L-O-W. Now this flow state is an indicator of a self-actualized mind. Now some of us may not be in a flow state for a long time, but we may find ourselves in a flow state at a particular lecture, when we are playing with our child, when we are gardening, when we are washing our pet, when we are going on a long train ride and looking at the nature. Now for those states of mind to occur in the mind, it's not combined with negative mental states or unhealthy mental states. So very pure healthy states. So therefore in Professor Chandana's question, lowered mind states can't coexist with self-actualized mind states. I hope that's clear. There's another question by Rosanti. When society pressurizes us to follow the expected pattern of life, stating that successful people mostly follow the expected pattern, then it becomes a bigger barrier when we take steps to choose what we believe, like which is not the usual pattern. Absolutely, that's a thing, like many of so when we come to old age, what old age geriatric psychology or what they say is that when they have looked at life stories and life histories of older people, they regret not taking that decision, you see, not taking that decision when they were 30 years or 27 years or 35 years, and now they are already 70 years. It's too late. But at 30 years or 27 years, the societal pressure is so great that many of us still just hang on doing what the society tells us to do. So it takes great effort and strength to say, I don't want to do this. Now, for example, I have a friend of mine who I think he started medicine at Ragama, and he said when he felt that he was already cut out to doing medicine. He was really interested in starting new businesses. So during the time of his final MBBS, he was actually editing the annual report of Haley's, which is a big annual report because Haley's being a blue chip company. So he finished also got through his final MBBS, but then he decided, and his father himself was a physician, first eldest son of the family, great emphasis on him being a doctor too, but he decided, I don't want to do the internship. I want to go ahead and realize my dreams of starting new companies. And now he's the owner of 4 companies, one on IT, one on annual reports, one on media, and very happy. So, to take those decisions against family advice, societal pressures, and even our own conditioning is not easy. That is why most of us are stuck in a box. So what I suggest is don't take huge decisions like suddenly, you suddenly go and dump your personal career and start training to be astronaut kind of things. But just to do some little things like, when you have this new invitation to sit in a committee, initially you want to sit in it, but you don't even want to do it. Think and maybe decline. Do little things and see how it affects your mind. See the new avenues that might open up to you when you say no to things you don't want to do, and take it as an experiment. Any other questions, or are we done?
Madam, there's another question at the chat.
Okay, self-attribution bias, overconfidence. I would think so. Overconfidence is not indicated for actualization. Actualizations are very pure mind states.
Are there any questions? It's a very interesting discussion, madam. Ultimately, you came for a very nice point. Think out of the box.
Yeah. And be effortful to put it into practice.
Yes. So, do we have any other questions from the audience?
I'll just ask one more question.
Yeah,
sorry.
Sure.
Of course, please.
Professor, I've tried practicing present moment awareness many times.
Yeah.
Like I've tried it for some time, but then what happens at some point is I get so frustrated. In the sense, there are so many things coming into my mind, maybe, and so many thoughts. I mean, there's no space for me to think. There's a lot of turmoil going inside, or sometimes it's just unbearable. I just don't know where the pain comes or where the suffering comes from. But the word is right. It becomes a suffering at a certain point because I can't stop the flow of thoughts that comes into my mind. So is there something wrong that the way I'm doing it, or is it too much pressure that I put on myself to be aware of the present?
I believe there's something wrong with your technique. Because first of all, some of the things that you said, that there is no space for thought.
Yeah.
That occurrence should not even happen.
Okay.
And usually when you live in the present moment, you just know the thoughts and that's it. So I suggest, Vishwara, it's really great that you saw this phenomena. I really suggest that you talk to a properly qualified present moment awareness practitioner rather than doing it yourself, because it could be detrimental to you.
Right. Thanks a lot.
So, do we have any other questions? So, feel free to ask questions. So, don't take this as an academic session. So, it's just a friendly discussion that we have arranged. Okay. So, since there are no questions, on behalf of the Staff Development Committee, Madam, I would like to thank you very much. I would simply tell it's a superb lecture because a lot of people joined it, because I think as the staff development committee, we have achieved our goal, because not only the medical people, the non-medical professions also joined it. Initially I saw a lot of students also in this participant group. So I think we have achieved our goal. Thank you, madam. And so I will wind up the session. Thank you for participating. So if you have any questions, so later on also you can Google Professor Priyanjali D'Souza. So, and you can find her email on the internet. So please keep in contact and solve your problems. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you, madam.